Please Murder Me from 1956 was a tense murder mystery courtroom drama that starred Raymond Burr as a defense attorney and Angela Lansbury as his manipulative lover, one who is accused of murder. But as the plot unfolds, the attorney discovers the truth about her guilt that leads to a shocking conclusion to the film. I really enjoyed this one, and I'll give an overview of the film with no spoilers and then offer some closing thoughts. So like any good crime film, this one opens up with a shadowy figure walking down a street at night. Some very nice noir going on. And I'll comment more about this later, but you can tell from the clips that I'm using here that this was a hard film to find a good quality copy of. It is in the public domain. There's a bunch of copies out there. They all look terrible. So sadly, get used to some of the vertical lines that periodically plague this film. Anyhow, our shadowy figure goes into a shop and purchases a gun. And the credits then explode onto the screen. Pow, they just fly right in your face. Well, this figure makes his way into a grocery store-looking entrance and ultimately into his office, where he goes into his desk and he sets up a folder and the gun and then starts an audio recording predicting his murder. In exactly 55 minutes, I will be dead. Murder. And we see that this is Raymond Burr as the attorney, Craig Carlson. And yes, this is Burr playing a pre-Perry Mason lawyer, so it's pretty cool to see. He talks in this audio about his friend Joe Leeds, actor Dick Ferran, who was an old war buddy who took a bullet for him. And it's from this that we jump into our flashback as we go back in time of Craig going to meet with Joe. And it's here that he uncomfortably confesses that he is in love with Joe's wife and having an affair with her and wants to marry her. Well, Joe is notably upset about this, but, it's his old friend, so he says he just needs a few days to think about it, and he up and leaves. Craig heads to go see Mira, who's played here by a lovely young Angela Lansbury, of Murder, She Wrote fame. He tells her about his talk with Joe and how it went. She doesn't seem all that broken up about things and seems to only want to be with Craig now. Now later at his office, Joe is visited by his friend Lou, actor Robert Griffin. Joe laments that things have been going poorly with his marriage with Mira, and then asks that he would send an important letter for him to send it to Craig. He calls Mira and tells her that he will be home soon. It's a rainy, stormy night. Joe arrives home, goes into the room with his wife, closes the door, and the cat is startled by the sound of gunshots. The detectives arrive, they talk with Mira, and the story is that Joe had apparently come in angrily, had thrown her around, saying he was going to kill her, so she needed to grab a gun and had to shoot him in self-defense. Craig shows up and talks with her, and we find out he will be representing her in court because he loves her. The film then shifts into a courtroom drama. John Denner plays the district attorney Ray Willis, who questions how there were no signs of struggle in the room, including photo evidence showing nothing disturbed on the dresser, even though apparently this big struggle had taken place. Craig meets with Mira later and plans to have her take the stand. And he also gives her a ring, planning to marry her after the trial. Wow. Back in court, Myra takes a stand, and Craig questions her about Joe's temper and how he had a tendency towards violence. Now, the DA plays up the angle that Joe had a lot of money and she didn't, so she stood to inherit a lot of money when he died. But to shut this down and just to close out the defense, Craig tells the court that the financial motive is invalid because Myra was in love with another man, and he reveals that he was that man, and that this could be the cause of Joe wanting to cause harm to her. Well, she's found not guilty by the jury, and things seem to be going good for the young lovers, but all is not as it seems, and here's where we get into the big twist of the film. Craig is having a party a little bit later at his house, and Lou shows up, wanting to speak privately with him. He gives Craig the letter that he was supposed to have given him earlier, but I guess he forgot or something. So Craig in his office, he's reading this letter in his head, and we hear it kind of being read out loud. And in this letter from Joe, who, remember, he was the guy that was shot, he's basically saying to Craig that he had married Myra because he thought she loved him, only to find out months later that she didn't. Now, Joe wanted a divorce, but she insisted on half of his money, which Joe refused. Joe then reveals that he figured out that Myra was in love with someone else, but who could it be? The letter warns Craig not to believe her lies. Well, now Craig suspects that this artist character, he was a guy who had visited Myra when she was in lockup, might be the guy that she is involved with. So he goes to visit with him. And this is a character, Carl Holt, played by actor Lamont Johnson. And Craig chats with him, and he seems like a decent, down-to-earth painter. But he confirms that, yes, he's been in love with Myra since college. Craig asks about Joe, and Carl admits that Myra was all about the money and had only married Joe just for the cash, and that was at a time when they didn't see one another. So Carl had to lay low, and he didn't even testify at the trial. But he admires how Craig did an amazing job in the court defending her. Obviously, he doesn't suspect that Craig has a thing for Myra, but poor sap. Well, now that Craig knows of her cheating ways, he goes to confront Myra about this Carl fellow, and she doesn't deny it at all. He reads Joe's letter to her and has pretty much figured out that, yeah, she did murder Joe for the money. Since she was found innocent by the court, though, she can't be found guilty again for the same crime. So Craig really has only one plan here, that Myra will kill him. You know, the title of the film, Please Kill Me. So Myra, she knows that she's been made. She knows that Craig has figured out her evil scheme, so she's planning to leave the country with Carl. But Craig is going to keep them around. He offers Craig a lot of money for a personal portrait. So this is where Craig starts to put his plan into motion. But what will this scheme be? Can he bring down Myra for her wicked actions? Or will she get away with her crime? Okay, I don't want to spoil the ending, so I'm just going to stop here. And I'll let you check the ending out for yourself. Well, let me offer some closing thoughts about this one. Please Murder Me was released in 1956. It was directed by Peter Godfrey and was apparently produced by Distributors Corporation of America. Hey, Rob, I've never heard of Distributors Corporation of America. Well, neither had I, so I did a little bit of research. A DCA was an American film distribution company that released about 60 films in the U.S. between 1952 and 1959. Not much to say about them, as it looks like most of their titles are not very well known. I think a lot of them are in the public domain. Hal Roach took over the company in late 1958. And some of the more notorious titles from DCA include The Crawling Eye from 1958 and the epic cheesy masterpiece Plan 9 from Outer Space from 1957. And as mentioned earlier, this one is in the public domain and the quality is really kind of lacking. I tried to find the best copy I could for the review. There just aren't any good copies out there. This one that I used for the review, it looks like the movie had been run through an industrial washing machine. Although granted, you kind of get used to the vertical lines after a while. Yeah, the video and the audio is not the best, but you know what? I work with what I can on this channel. So my thoughts and impressions on this film, that this was a really good murder mystery, courtroom drama that in a way reminded me almost of an episode of like the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. It's a clever idea how it's presented. You've got the noble lawyer falling for the lovely lady who was in fact guilty. And, watching the film, obviously, there's similarities to other films like, say, the Paradigm Case from 1947 with Gregory Peck as the lawyer who falls for his beautiful client, believing she's innocent, but we know better. I think what I really enjoyed about this one, to be honest, is just seeing not only Raymond Burr as a pre-Perry Mason lawyer, but also seeing Angela Lansbury as the lovely young woman essentially pulling off the kind of calculated murder that decades later, her famous character Jessica Fletcher would try to routinely solve on the show Murder, She Wrote. Now, as my three fans know, I'm a huge fan of Murder, She Wrote. I just love how Jessica Fletcher is this brilliant amateur detective who, between writing murder mystery novels, uncovers all of these various killings week after week that usually all take place in the fictional town of Cabot Cove, Maine. And how there's anybody still alive in Cabot Cove, I don't know. No one seems to find it odd that everywhere she goes, someone winds up dead. But I guess that's just half the fun of the show. She's like this weird harbinger of death or something. And the mysteries that she solves always seem to involve some ridiculous bit of plot detail that nobody watching the episode could ever figure out. Oh, the murderer was left-handed and just happened to be working in the same prison years ago where the victim was a librarian or something like that. But, regardless of all of that, I love the stories and especially love the large number of Golden Age actors who would make a return to the small screen on Murder, She Wrote. Rob, you're going way off track. Yeah, I know. There was a rumor that for Murder, She Wrote, Angela Lansbury made a particular point of hiring fellow actors from the Golden Age of Hollywood just for the show, to kind of give them a chance at another acting role. So I researched this a little bit. Newsweek had an article on this, and while the story can't really be verified that she did indeed go out of her way to hire older actors, the fact is that during the run of Murder, She Wrote from 1984 to 1996, there were hundreds of guest actors during that time frame. And from what I've seen from watching the show, you see countless veteran actors appear. Eddie Albert, Janet Leigh, Eli Wallach, Lloyd Nolan, June Allison, Van Johnson, and so on. Actors who I've seen in numerous films on my channel. I post screenshots of these actors as guest stars on my YouTube community tab all the time. So yes, that's one of the many reasons I love this show. And as of this writing, if you are wondering, Murder, She Wrote is streaming free on Amazon Prime. Okay, sorry. I went off track. Let me get back to the film. Yes, this one did have a low production value, but I thought that the film still managed to use plenty of moody shadow and lighting to tell a good story. And I really thought it was interesting in that as the mystery unfolds, you're really left wondering how things will play out. I didn't really think it was predictable. You wonder, are we actually going to get to the please murder me moment? Are we going to see this femme fatale actually kill the noble lawyer? Kind of kept you guessing how things would happen. One of the things I love about old films is when the narrative is driven by flashbacks. And yes, it happens a lot in old crime films, but I always enjoy it, The film begins, the story opens. We see that something terrible is going to happen eventually. And then through a series of flashbacks, the story unfolds and then brings us all the way back to the end of the film where we resolve whatever that situation was. Something like DOA with Edmund O'Brien, where the film opens up, he's playing this character that's been poisoned and staggering into a police station, and then he tells a story, and then it all unfolds through the film. And I thought this film did a great job telling the story that way. And again, you just really weren't sure what was going to happen with the characters. And again, I just love the irony that this is Angela Lansbury, who, again, for me, it's hard not to think of as Jessica Fletcher, But here, she is the one that has committed this murder, and you're wondering if she's going to get away with it. So, reading through Martin Gottfried's biography of Angela Lansbury about the film, it was interesting to read that it turns out that this was something of a low point in her career. And they actually filmed a lot of this movie in an abandoned supermarket. So it was definitely a low-budget production. And after the filming was complete, Lansbury actually went right to the California State Welfare Department and signed up for unemployment insurance. And that I know of, this is the only film that both Angela Lansbury and Raymond Burr have been in together. And yes, I do need to make a note of Raymond Burr's performance, as I think he does an excellent job in this film as well as the attorney who falls for the wrong woman. I really enjoyed his court scenes, and it was pretty cool because it seems almost like watching early Perry Mason. And it's really interesting to me that this film was made the same year that Burr auditioned for the Perry Mason character. So this film was released in 1956, and Perry Mason was 1957. Oh, Rob, you're not going to start rambling about your interest in Perry Mason, are you? No. Well, actually, no, I'll leave that for another day. Please Murder Me from 1956 was a gripping murder mystery where Raymond Burr plays an attorney who's fallen for the wrong woman and unintentionally defends this lovely femme fatale played by Angela Lansbury in court. I enjoyed the suspense and the good performances and the enjoyable twist to this one. And again, it was a low-budget production. Most of the copies out there are pretty shabby. It is in the public domain. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it free on Tubi. But it's out there. And it's an enjoyable crime film, and it's one worth checking out.